And next we have a virtual speaker, Margot GRISWOLD from the Audubon Society for 10 minutes.
And I have a PowerPoint slide, a set that was given to you this morning. Good morning. I guess it's afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm Margot GRISWOLD with Los Angeles Audubon Society. We have 4,000 members and supporters, and we have had an education program at the Ballona wetlands for well over 25 years. We also conduct public outreach and opportunity for the public to visit the wetlands on open wetlands weekends, where we guide people into the wetlands and set up various stations. I want to thank Chief Anthony Morales for appearing today. And, this is my first slide that shows Ballona is full of water, and that's full of fresh water. I'd like to just go next slide to correct a few misconceptions. One is that the Science Advisory Panel was very top down, and they were given a duty to look at restoring the ebb and flow of the tide. We had limited stakeholder meetings, and they ignored tribal ideas for restoration. You saw John Tommy Rosas, ally to Anthony Morales and Grassroots Coalition. His ideas were ignored. He's since passed. However, he is on tape and his writings still exist, so he shouldn't really be ignored. The plan ignores some of the published scientific reports that refute the misconceptions about what Ballona historically was. And they keep a plan that they really came up with in the early 2000s. Next slide, please. The reports are from trusted individuals and from the Southern California Wetlands Recovery Program published, the Ballona Creek Watershed Historical Ecology, and also the closure patterns of Southern California wetlands, coastal wetlands. And what they tell you is Ballona was mainly a closed system. There was no daily ebb and flow of tide, unless you want to go back to that 4,000-year-old picture. And so it brings us to restoration, which the goal is for an ecological restoration to return a degraded ecosystem to its historic trajectory. So with all the people who've been involved, as you've heard, we should keep it on a historic trajectory. We can't go back. We all agree something should be done with the Ballona wetlands. But should it be the CDFW plan to dig out all the supposed sediment? I don't particularly agree, and neither do many of the scientists that I work with at UCLA. And the CDFW plan will remove existing marsh species, and as sea level rises, it doesn't make it resilient. So you see that by 2100, and even before that, we're losing very rare habitat. And by 2100, all we have left is open water and mudflat. Next slide, please. This change in habitat types that has occurred for the last 50 years or more in Southern California. Can you go to the next? You're going, yeah, one slide more, please, forward. There we have it. This shows you the change in habitat types. You'll notice that open water and mudflat right in the center has increased by 615% in Southern California. Otherwise, the salt flat, which is a very important component of Ballona, and one of the largest ones left, 90% has been destroyed. Salt marsh habitat has lost 12%, and freshwater brackish wetlands, 54%. That's coastal wetlands, what we're talking about. Next slide, please. The salt pan is extremely important. It's important to migrating species and important to year-round species, because when it dries and it's driven by rainwater, evaporating rainwater leaves behind salt. It provides food when it's wet, and it provides areas that birds can loaf and see in a great distance their enemies coming. So it's a very important habitat, and it will be lost completely in a few years due to sea level rise. Next slide, please. Let's learn from what's been already done. We already have up and down the coast, jettied open, engineered, tidal wetlands where none existed. Take Bolsa Chica, 16 years ago. And now what do we have? We have a report that says they're looking for a more sustainable alternative, mainly because the target salt marsh pickleweed has drowned in too much tidal water. It's all due to bad engineering in relation to what the habitat was, trying to make something fit. So this should tell us that additionally with sea level rise, all we're going to get is that open water mudflat. Next slide, please. And what do we lose? We lose rare habitat. As you've heard all the speakers say, we will lose that pickleweed habitat, home to the Belding savanna sparrow, California endangered species, as well as many other raptors, owls, and the fully protected white-tailed kite. Next slide, please. So what do we have here? We do not have a study of the interaction of the surface and groundwater hydrology of this historic wetland. Next slide, please. We've told you in the tours, and when I've spoken before, this is a seasonal freshwater wetland. You can see that in the fall, it's dry. And as the rains come into the spring, wet and a basis for habitat. Next slide, please. But we know now that the fresh water is being drained from any number of areas. In area A, in area B, there's 3 areas it's drained. And there used to be more. Next slide, please. We've shown through grassroots diligence efforts and community members seeing unpermitted drains, the Coastal Commission ordered it closed, these 2 drains in area B north. What could be worse than draining a wetland? And within 3 years, the pickleweed was back. So the annual invasive grass, exotic, was gone. We're seeing so much drainage. Next slide. I'm going to just speed through this because why we need a hearing is to know why all this water, fresh water, is being drained. Next slide. I've shown you this before. Next slide. And the next slide, please. I want to go 2 more to the Santa Monica Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan, because this gets to the heart of the matter. We need to know from the Water Board and staff how much water is CDFW draining from the freshwater wetlands. Next slide. And we need to know what that connection is. If I could have the next slide, please. Next. There we go. Thank you. The Santa Monica Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability found that there are unsupported claims that the Bellflower Aquitard is hydraulically disconnected from the Ballona and Silverwater aquifers that underlie the Ballona wetlands and much of the subbasin. This is exactly what CDFW has told your staff in response to comments why there's no problem with saltwater intrusion. Yet, there is no saltwater intrusion monitoring wells that can be identified for the groundwater sustainability plan. And we're not the only—
Ms. Griswold, we'll have to
So we're
move on. I
we're
believe
asking for a full—
your time is up.